Heavy snow is battering Korea's south, while the entire country has been suffering from freezing temperatures for days that are disrupting airports, roads, and facilities. North Korea appears to be operating a new reactor at the Yongbyon nuclear complex for the first time, which, according to the IAEA, is another potential source for its nuclear weapons. The U.S. has formed a multinational coalition of over 20 nations to counter Yemen's Houthis attacking ships in the Red Sea amid the Israel-Hamas war. It's December 22nd, 2023. This is Newscenter. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. We begin with the extreme weather that's becoming more of a concern here in South Korea. Heavy snow is battering the southern regions, and the whole country has been suffering from the freezing temperatures for days. Yoon starts us off.
Heavy snowfall across Jeju on Friday led to an 8-hour suspension of flights in and out of the island's international airport. Flights have since resumed, but Jeju Island expects 3 to 8 centimeters of snow until Saturday, while the summit of Hallasan Mountain has already recorded nearly 1 meter of accumulated snowfall so far. Accordingly, all trails on Hallasan Mountain will be completely restricted until Monday. Similarly, 3 to 8 centimeters of snow are forecast for the west coast regions of Jeollabuk-do Province, western Gwangju, and Jeollanam-do Province. Cold wave warnings are still in effect for most of the country. The capital, Seoul, saw the temperatures dipping to minus 13.8 degrees at one point.
The last few days have been the coldest of this winter so far. The temperature on Friday afternoon was at minus 8 degrees Celsius.
And with the wind chill, the temperatures will be even colder.
I've lived in Korea for over 10 years, and I think this is probably the coldest winter so far. So I've just been bundling up, wearing lots of layers. Yeah, I hope everyone is warm and healthy this holiday season.
Morning temperatures dropped to around minus 15 degrees Celsius in the Seoul metropolitan area and inland and mountainous areas of Gangwon-do Province, Chungcheongbuk-do Province, and northern regions of Gyeongsangbuk-do Province. The sudden temperature drop is causing a rise in cold-related illnesses and accidents. Since last Saturday, there have been 85 reported cases of temperature-related illnesses, and 1 person has died this month due to the extreme cold. Yoon, Arirang News.
The United Nations nuclear watchdog says a second North Korean nuclear reactor in Yongbyon appears to be operational. This could mean an additional potential source of plutonium for the regime's nuclear weapons. Bae Eun-ji reports.
A new reactor at North Korea's Yongbyon nuclear complex appears to be operating for the first time. That's according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, a UN nuclear watchdog based in Vienna. The Yongbyon nuclear complex is where North Korea has for years used its 5-megawatt nuclear reactor to produce plutonium for nuclear weapons. But the latest observations of warm water being discharged from a larger light water reactor suggest it too is in operation. The IAEA had earlier said that since mid-October, it had observed a strong water outflow from the light water reactor's cooling system, suggesting an ongoing commissioning of the reactor. The agency's Director General Rafael Grossi said in a statement on Thursday local time that more recent observations show that this water discharge is warm, indicating the reactor has reached criticality, meaning the nuclear chain reaction in the reactor is self-sustaining. He said this is concerning as a light water reactor, like any nuclear reactor, can produce plutonium in its irradiated fuel, which can be separated during reprocessing. But he added that without access to the facility, the IAEA cannot confirm its operational status. The agency's observations are made mostly using satellite imagery, as it has not had access to North Korea since Pyongyang expelled its inspectors in 2009. The IAEA chief stressed the construction and operation of the light water reactor is a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, and said the advancement of North Korea's nuclear program is deeply regrettable. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Amid the Israel-Hamas war, tensions are now rising in the Red Sea, where there's a major trade route as Yemen's Houthis attack ships in support of Palestinians. The U.S. has formed a coalition involving over 20 nations to tackle this. An Sung-jin takes a closer look.
As drone and missile attacks by Yemen-based Houthi militants continue against ships passing through the Red Sea and Suez Canal, more nations are joining efforts to protect the waterway. The U.S. Department of Defense announced on Thursday that more than 20 countries were now taking part in the U.S.-led coalition, Operation Prosperity Guardian.
All countries have the right to move freely and lawfully in international waters. But that foundational global right is under new threat today from the totally unacceptable attacks on merchant vessels by the Houthis in Yemen. We've launched Operation Prosperity Guardian.
The multinational force is to safeguard commercial traffic in the Red Sea from the Iran-backed rebel movement by providing vessels, staff, and other support. The crisis in the Red Sea grew over Houthi support of Palestine over the Israel-Hamas war. At least a dozen shipping lines have suspended use of the waterway that caters to some 10% of world trade. The coalition started with more than a dozen countries, including the UK, Canada, France, Italy, Norway, and others.
It is absolutely essential that those maritime corridors, that the free movement of ships, of goods, of manufacturers, of oil, of world trade, that they keep going. That is what Operation Prosperity Guardian is all about, and Britain is proud to take part in that.
The Pentagon noted that at least 8 countries refused to be named due to political sensitivity as regional tensions tightened over the Israel-Hamas war. Countries such as Saudi Arabia and the UAE declined to join over future relationships with Iran, and Australia refused to join, declaring that diplomacy was better than violence. Though South Korea did not explicitly state to join the coalition, it is looking at ways to contribute to protecting the sea route following the U.S.'s request. The Red Sea is a major trade route that connects Asia with Europe and North America via the Suez Canal. Instead of passing through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, some container ships were diverted around the Cape of Good Hope, adding an extra 10 to 14 days to their trips. Currently, 158 vessels with approximately 2.1 million containers, worth $105 billion are changing their routes to alternatives. Logistics companies are looking to find alternative trade routes such as the Transcontinental Railroad or the Panama Canal, while carefully calculating the transportation time and cost as shipping costs sharply rise. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
In the Czech Republic, the country is reeling in the aftermath of a mass shooting spree that took the lives of more than a dozen people in Prague on Monday. Yoon covers this tragic event.
The Philosophy Department building in Prague's Charles University on Thursday was the scene of the deadliest attack in modern Czech history. According to officials, 14 people were shot dead at the university and 25 others were injured, while warning that the death toll could rise. Prague's police chief also confirmed that the gunman was also dead. But due to devastating injuries, it is not yet clear if he killed himself or died while exchanging gunfire with officers. They also confirmed that there was nothing to suggest that he had an accomplice. The shooter legally owned several guns and was described as an excellent student with no prior criminal record. Police also believe the gunman killed his own father in his hometown just west of Prague before heading to the university. And later on Thursday, based on a search of the gunman's home, he is now also suspected of killing a man and a 2-month-old baby girl in Prague on December 15th. The Czech government declared Saturday, December 23rd, a national day of mourning to honor the victims. The Czech Interior Minister said that the shooting had no connection to international terrorism, while President Petr Pavel asked for respect for those killed.
I'm calling on everybody that they don't abuse this tragedy, that it's not abused politically, that it's not used to attack the police, that it's not used to spread misinformation. And this call is to everybody, to politicians, to the media, to citizens, to everybody who has access to social media. Because we need, in a situation like this, is first and foremost is piety, restraint, and togetherness.
The building where the shooting took place is in Jan Pala Square, a busy tourist area in Prague's Old Town. Just a few minutes' walk from the picturesque Old Town Square, a major tourist attraction where a popular Christmas market attracts thousands of visitors. Previously, the nation's worst mass shooting was in 2015 when a gunman opened fire in the southwestern town of Uherský Brod, killing 8 before fatally shooting himself. Yoon, Arirang News.
Beijing prohibits the export of rare earth metals processing technology, while Washington announces a survey to identify U.S. firms' reliance on Chinese so-called legacy chips. However, South Korean officials say the situation will largely not affect Korean companies yet. Park Go-nu has more on this latest U.S.-China tension.
China has announced on Thursday that it'll ban the exports of technology used to extract and separate rare earth metals. According to Reuters, the ban was put in place to protect China's dominance over rare earth metals, as well as for reasons of national security, with Western countries, including the U.S., trying to launch their own operations. China's Commerce Ministry had been considering adding this processing technology to its catalog of technologies prohibited and restricted from export since last December. There are 17 rare earth metals that are used to produce electromagnets used in electric vehicles, wind turbines, and electronics, and China accounts for 70% of the global production. Production technology for rare earth metals and alloy materials, along with manufacturing tech for rare earth magnets, were also included in the export ban. On the same day, the U.S. Department of Commerce announced it would be surveying over 100 U.S. firms in sectors including automobiles, aerospace, and defense in January on how reliant they are on so-called legacy chips made in China. It added, the survey aims to reduce national security risks posed by Beijing and identify the use and sourcing of Chinese chips in the supply chains of major U.S. industries. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said, addressing non-market actions by foreign governments that threaten the U.S. legacy chip supply chain is a matter of national security, adding, we've seen potential signs of concerning practices from China to expand their firm's legacy chip production and make it harder for U.S. companies to compete. The U.S. is also considering trading measures such as raising tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles. Meanwhile, an official from Korea's industry ministry said the implications of the conflict between the U.S. and China are hard to predict. But he added, the ministry expects these will be minimal in the short term, as the country imports processed rare earth metals from China, and the U.S. has not announced measures to be taken after its survey. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
South Korea is focusing on efforts to grow its biomedical competency by 2027. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo said at the first meeting of a Biomedical Innovation Committee that the government will seek to double industry exports, enhance technological capabilities, and foster 110,000 researchers and scientists by then. It also plans to invest 2 trillion Korean won, or around $1.54 billion in a decade-long R&D project scheduled for launch next year. Researchers will be collaborating with leading scientists worldwide to tackle major health-related tasks, such as vaccine development. President Yoon today held a Christmas gathering for bereaved families of uniformed men and women who were killed in the line of duty. Hosting his first Christmas event at the presidential office, Yoon put on what was called a Christmas of Hope and Dreams with heroes' families for around 30 spouses and young children of late soldiers, police officers, firefighters, and other uniformed workers who died on duty. It included a luncheon, various activities, a magic show, and individualized presents for the children that were aimed at inspiring hope. Heroes Family is a new project endorsed by the Ministry of Patriots and Veteran Affairs to support the bereaved underage children of those who died during active service, providing mentoring, scholarships, and emotional support programs with various charities. Seoul's Bukchon and Seochon Hanok villages are among the top highlights for tourists to the city. But it might be a little hard for you to see beyond the walls unless you're staying overnight in a Hanok. But now visitors can get a peek inside thanks to the new Public Hanok Lounges. Our Choi Soo-young invites to the real Hanok world.
Seoul is a place where tradition meets modernity. In Jongno-gu districts, Bukchon Hanok Village and Seochon Hanok Village, visitors can feel this distinct Korean vibe. And to allow visitors to see inside these traditional buildings, the villages have created Public Hanok Lounges. In the lounge of this traditional Korean house, you can experience how such a building is set up within the outer walls and also get information about tourist attractions nearby. While strolling through Bukchon Hanok Village, you can take a short break at Bukchon Lounge, which is open to the public for free. Even without an overnight stay, it allows visitors to explore the hidden interiors of hanoks and to experience the warmth of Hanok life, enjoying a Korean-style tea ceremony with delightful conversations.
And so, to be honest, we just kind of walked in, just like we're walking in all the different hanoks in this area. And this was an amazing, tea ceremony and a great kind of concierge service.
I think we like to go with the flow a lot, and sometimes it's like when you go with the flow when you travel, then you get lucky to experience and having a very unique experience. Yeah. And I think like this was definitely something that we will remember in our memories of Korea.
There is also a baggage storage service, and on Fridays, the lounges also offer a Korean language class. They are open from Tuesday to Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. While Bukchon Lounge introduces the tradition of hanoks, Seochon Lounge has a different charms, showing how hanoks can blend with modern lifestyles.
Here, not only Korean crafts, but also Bauhaus-style furniture is on display, so people seem to be amazed and have fun, thinking that, wow, the furniture can fit in a hanok like this way.
Visitors to Bukchon Lounge and Seochon Lounge can enjoy a delightful time sipping warm tea, experiencing the everyday life of Seoul's hanoks and learning about their values. Choi-Hyung, Arirang News.
South Korea is seeing a major RSV outbreak, with those needing to be hospitalized doubling in the past month. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency announced on Friday that the number of inpatients due to RSV during the third week of December amounted to 367, which is about twice the amount from the month before. Among them, more than 72% were children under 6, including newborns. RSV is one of the more common respiratory viruses that usually causes cold-like symptoms. But infants, older adults, or those with weak immune systems are more likely to develop severe symptoms. It's Friday, and it's time for our weekly arts and culture segment. We have our culture correspondent, Song Yoo-jin, in the studio. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas in advance, Jongmin.
I have to say this, you remind me of Santa Claus Day. What do you have for us today?
Well, Jongmin, I can't believe that Christmas is just 3 days away. And just like a lot of people, this is my favorite time of the year because everything around us is just filled with holiday spirit. It's holly, jolly, and it's festive. And what makes this mood more festive is the timeless Christmas classic, the Nutcracker. It's a ballet piece that's performed worldwide at this time of year. And some say Christmas just wouldn't be Christmas without it. Now, the production is over a century old, but several ballet companies have introduced some exciting changes this year. So let's first take a look.
The beloved holiday classic is back. Every year around Christmas, ballet companies from around the world present their take on Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker. This year, a number of ballet companies have infused a new flavor into this time-honored tradition. The Korean National Ballet and Universal Ballet, the two major ballet companies in Korea, have introduced new faces into the main roles, breaking away from the tradition of selecting principal dancers. Ballerina Chung Eun-ji joined the Korean National Ballet in 2021. From her first year, she was an understudy for the main character, Marie. Her debut on Wednesday marked her first time dancing in a leading role.
I still remember watching our company's version of the Nutcracker when I was a kid. This is a role I've always wanted to play. I'm happy and a bit nervous at the same time.
Universal Ballet's Lee joined the company as a soloist after 7 years at the Hungarian National Ballet. She's playing Clara, another name for Marie. For her, it's a childhood dream come true.
I've danced in the Nutcracker before, but this experience with Universal Ballet is special. When I was young, I had the chance to perform as young Clara with the UBC. The ballerinas who shared the stage with me at that time have now become principal dancers, so preparing this piece with them was particularly meaningful.
Beyond Korea, the Boston Ballet, one of the 4 major ballet companies in the United States, has chosen all 5 of its Korean dancers to play the main roles in the Nutcracker. Among them is Han Seo-hae, the Boston Ballet's first Korean principal dancer, who's been with the company since 2012.
I'm the oldest among the Korean dancers, and I feel both nervous and excited when I see them perform. My sincere wish is for my younger colleagues to dance happily and healthily for a long time because they're so talented.
With its intricate choreography, dazzling set, beautiful scores, and fresh new faces, the Nutcracker continues to enchant audiences around the world and bringing the Christmas spirit.
Eugene, as you mentioned in your report, there are a lot of versions of the Nutcracker. I noticed the names of the main characters are not the same. How is each production different?
Right, so first of all, the choreography is entirely different. For example, the Korean National Ballet's choreography was made by the Bolshoi Ballet's Yuri Grigorovich, while the Universal Ballet uses that of Mariinsky Ballet's Vasily Vainonen. And Boston Ballet's choreography is by its artistic director, Mikko Nissinen. And the main characters' names are also different. It's Marie for the Korean National Ballet, Clara for Universal Ballet, and the Sugar Plum Fairy for the Boston Ballet.
And what are some unique features or exciting elements in each version?
Well, I asked a question to all 3 dancers that I interviewed, and Chung Eun-ji of Korean National Ballet picked a scene where dolls from a lot of countries, for example, Russia, China, and India, they all come up, they pair up, and they take turns dancing. And Universal Ballet's Lee Yoo-rim said that the highlight of Universal Ballet's production is the precision and delicate choreography. Finally, Han Seo-hae of the Boston Ballet said it's when the giant teddy bear comes out of a box during the first act. So for those who are interested, the Korean National Ballet's The Nutcracker is on at the Seoul Art Center until December 25th. As for the Universal Ballet and the Boston Ballet, they both run until December 31st. And just wrapping up, I just want to say Merry Christmas to all our viewers out there, and once again to you, Chungmin.
It's a little early, but Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. The lunar calendar is saying today's 동지, meaning the strongest cold wave, has reached its peak this winter. The wind chill temperatures went down even further, with gusty winds getting stronger. This freezing cold wave will continue throughout the day tomorrow. Snow warnings are still in place on the west coast area of Jeollabuk-do province and Jeju Island, and heavy snow warnings are still issued on the west coast area of Jeollanam-do and Chungcheongnam-do provinces. From now on, snowfall will be focused on the west coast area of the Jeollado provinces and Jeju Island. Looking at the amount of snow, up to 30 centimeters are expected in mountainous areas of Jeju Island, and more than 10 centimeters on the west coast area of Jeollado provinces. The snow on the west coast will mostly stop overnight, but Jeju Island will continue to snow until tomorrow night. Please take extra precautions. Tomorrow's Seoul and Daejeon will start off at minus 12 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will get up to minus 2 degrees. Gwangju and Daegu, 2 degrees Celsius. On Sunday, which is Christmas Eve, there will be another round of snow across the country. Then temperatures will gradually rise to 2 degrees Celsius. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Hello everyone, it's Friday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is already nearing the 2-year mark and the world is falling into turmoil ever more as the Israel-Hamas war in the Middle East has shaken up geopolitics as well. Israel strikes continue to hit Gaza amid hunger in the region hitting a record high and the death toll of Gaza residents nearing 20,000. Attacks are also being exchanged not only in the northern part of Israel between Israel and Hezbollah, but also in the Red Sea as the Yemen-backed Houthi group aims to attack all commercial ships heading to and from Israel. Meanwhile, the outlook for Ukraine in 2024 looks bleak as funding from the EU and the US is delayed. How have these two wars affected geopolitics and the global economy, and what do experts forecast for them? For this, we have invited Professor Im Eun-jung from Gwangju National University. Professor Im, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And we also have Professor Matteo Legrenzi from Ca' Foscari University of Venice. Good to have you with us, Professor Legrenzi.
It is an honor to be here.
All right, first question to our Professor Im. So this year, the attention of the world has been on two wars. The war in Ukraine sparked by Russia's invasion almost 2 years ago, and the war between Israel and Hamas in the Middle East. Before discussing each war, how have these two wars affected global geopolitics and the global economy?
Well, first of all, let me just emphasize a kind of new rising trend we can see from these two wars. These days we call these two wars as like a hybrid war, because of course we do see the conventional military conflict between the two parties, but not only that, again, all those kind of psychological war or even cognitive war, cyber or like drones, like more non-conventional, those dual use technologies are also used in the battlefield. And it's very much difficult to separate between the military and the civilian. So all the things are making the situations and more increasingly complex. So having had these kind of very, again, the complex situations, geopolitically speaking, we do see more and more countries are now, on the process of so-called realigning process. Again, for example, European countries, they also want to, of course, reduce their dependency on the Russian energy sources, and in order to, reduce their dependency on the Russian gas or like those conventional energy sources, they cannot but and they need to move their logistics or those kind of supplies from European continent itself to other regions, for example, in the Pacific. So we do see this kind of realigning process, which makes situations more complex. So what I'm trying to say is, again, the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, was kind of, over. However, after that, the pandemic's end, we now see a much more volatile, complex, complicating situations because of these two wars.
All right, I see. So we were able to see the trend of hybrid wars and alignment among certain countries. All right. Well, Professor Legrenzi, let's now talk about the war in the Middle East region first. Though the negotiation is stalled right now, as far as I know, Israel had reportedly offered to pause the fighting in Gaza, the first proposal since the collapse of a deal last month that led to a 7-day ceasefire and the release of more than 100 hostages. What might be the reason behind Israel's this time's offer, and how are their terms for truce differ?
That's an excellent question. Thank you. I mean, basically, the way to look at this, I think, it's that Israel's devastating military pressure on Gaza is a way to raise the price in negotiations. So the more suffering Israelis manage to inflict on the Palestinians in between these pauses, the more they can ask of Hamas in exchange for a pause. in terms of hostage release and so on and so forth. I mean, Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's recognized as a terrorist organization by the EU and the UK, but it also has a political role in Palestine. So the Israeli government is pretty insulated from international pressure, particularly under these circumstances, but ultimately you're right. The voice of the President of the United States has to be taken into account. So look at this sort of military pressure as a way to raise the price and then to sit back at the negotiating table and rising the price in terms of like the number of hostages that are released and possibly other concessions.
All right, I see your point, Professor. We'll hope to see another truce so that more hostages could return home. Now, Professor Im. Yes. I'd like to also talk about Washington's position. The U.S. has been steadfast in its support for Israel since the Hamas attack on October 7th. But it did urge Tel Aviv to make a transition from high-intensity operations to lower and more surgical tactics. What is Washington's stance on the war right now?
Well, traditionally speaking, again, the American Democratic Party, they also they have been consistently pretty much supportive for the Jewish people, and even the President Biden himself. I still remember he just mentioned that he identified himself as a Zionist. So of course they do have a kind of course, ideologically, religiously kind of, very close sentiment. However, the thing is, these days, American politics is very much divided, as we all know. Biden versus like a Trump, like a very much conflictual situation has been so long, and not only just this issue, any politically sensitive issue can easily just divide up the whole country into the two different camps. And interestingly, these days, the American politics, we do see a kind of generational transition or generation gap too. If you take a look into the kind of public poll data, the younger, again, the people, the respondents are, the more sympathetic they are with the people in Gaza, because those younger people who are, in their 20s or like 30s, they are very much sensitive with the humanitarian issues. So we do see kind of again the gap by even gender or by generation or by their religious belief, and demographically, of course, American society has been becoming more and more diverse. So, from the president's, again, the President Biden's point of view, or from the ruling party, Democratic Party's point of view, they need to think about those voices too. So it might be very much difficult for the current leadership to be just simply supportive for the Israeli government. Again, it's interconnected. Again, international politics, domestic politics are now intertwined. And, as we all know, they will be experiencing the very complicating year because of the president's election. Less than just 1 year left.
Right, I see. So although the U.S. has close sentiment to Israel, it seems people have different views over this war. All right. Now, Professor Legrenzi, meanwhile, amid the war in Gaza, tensions on Israel's northern front are mounting as well, with Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah exchanging attacks. Could you walk us through why this conflict is taking place? And do you see an all-out conflict with Hezbollah as being inevitable?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the conflict is taking place in a nutshell because Hezbollah is an important part of this axis of resistance to American hegemony that has been organized by Iran in the Middle East, and we're pretty proud about it. So Hezbollah and consequently Iran, they draw a lot of legitimacy in the region from applying military pressure to Israel. It is very unlikely, though, that the situation is going to escalate into a sort of like full-blown conflict, because that would mean the devastation of Lebanon. There has been a clear warning by Israel after the last war that this time the bombardment would be absolutely like all out and devastating. So neither like Israel or Hezbollah have an interest in an all-out conflict. So what you see on the border right now, it is very serious, but it is more of a choreographed escalation.
All right, I see your point. Thank you for explanation, Professor Legrenzi. Now, Professor Im, now, not just on the northern part of Israel, concerns are mounting on the Red Sea as well, as attacks by Iran-backed Houthis are on the rise. Could you give us some background on why the Houthi group are demanding that Israel ends its war in Gaza?
So far, whenever I think we see the kind of conflicts or international politics in the Middle East region, absolutely kind of rivalry, competition between the Saudi and Iran, I think is one of the most important variable. Even though they reconciled, having had the Chinese, that kind of coordination, but still, their kind of rivalry between the Saudi and Iran has been so long, and even though they are, religiously speaking, of course, they are all, Muslim. However, they do have, different views on their own, those beliefs or like principle. So-called the Sunni versus like a Shia, but Houthi, they do have more like connections religiously or even politically with Iran. And as the Professor like Ranji explained very well, again, the Hezbollah like. The group, they also do have like connections with Iran. These days, actually, North Korea's connections is more, we can hear more about that kind of, again, the connections too. But anyhow, Houthi, they are in the Yemen, their geopolitical position is so important because when we think the connectivity between the Mediterranean Sea and Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, Red Sea is literally in the middle. It's really the choke point that can really interrupt the logistics that connects to Europe and then in the Middle East and Asia. Of course, they do have their own probably strategic goal to complete their own, their kind of, again, the supportive, how would you say, they do have, of course, a supportive the sentiment for the those Palestinian people who are suffering in Gaza, but of course they at the same time they do have their own strategic goal, and again the geostrategically their location is so much important. So many those, we have now more and more risk in this region that can really cause the kind of cost and the risk of the logistics that again can connect Europe and then Asia.
All right. So Houthi group's attack is taking place for its own reason on the Red Sea. And Professor Legrenzi, to tackle this, the U.S. announced the creation of an enhanced naval protection force named Operation Prosperity Guardian. If the conflict intensifies, how would that affect global trade and the shipping industry?
That's an excellent question. I mean, it is already driving up insurance prices to the point that many carriers and many sort of like operators, they choose their route around Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, even if it adds weeks to every single journey. So it is already making an impact. And you mentioned the task force. What is very interesting to know and to note is that American regional allies, like Egypt or Saudi Arabia, they've not joined the task force because the one by the Houthi, as it was explained before, like is seen as an act of resistance against Israel. So this is very embarrassing for sort of like the regional allies, which of course welcome the stabilizing influence of the task force, but at the same time, they do not want to be seen as sort of like being too proactive in stemming what is an act of resistance against Israel, which is now conducting these operations in Gaza.
All right, I see your point, Professor. Now, Professor Im, let's turn our eyes to the war in Ukraine and discussions of the country joining the EU. Hungary's Prime Minister left the meeting in a pre-agreed manner, after which membership talks between the EU and Ukraine began. What significance does this green light have for Ukraine?
Well, Hungary, as we all know, has been much more reluctant or even negative about the Ukraine's joining to EU. So probably this time, and again, the Hungarian government was trying to be at least more like a neutral about, that kind of direction. But probably more important thing we can think about this kind of, again, the progress is, again, I feel just very, very sad and bad about all this, innocent victims who are dying in the war. However, at the same time, we have to think about the day after the war is concluded. So when the war is concluded, at some point, definitely the Ukrainian economy needs to be restored. And because of this war, even though we don't know yet how the war will be concluded, however, because of Russia's invasion, I can't think the relationship between the Ukraine and Russia can go back to someday in the past when they were in a good pattern. So, which means, again, the Ukraine, they definitely need more like supportive or friendly countries who can back up their economic or even political restoration. So in order to accomplish that kind of goal, I think, the Ukraine's, their membership in the EU is pretty much necessary.
Right, I see. Well, based on what our Professor Lim said, it is indeed a fortunate news for Ukraine to, get the support for the EU membership. However, the Hungary eventually blocked $55 billion worth of EU funding for Ukraine. And though EU leaders said the negotiations would resume next year, what impact would this have on the war in Ukraine, Professor Lagranzi?
That's an excellent question. I mean, of course, anything that shows a lessening of a commitment by the EU to Ukraine is bound to be welcomed by President Putin. On the other hand, I wouldn't really read too much into it. I mean, this is quite common in EU negotiations. I mean, trying to raise the price, or like one of the countries putting a veto. So I think this could be resolved quite swiftly in the new year. It is interesting to note how the EU has so far been remarkably united and fast in responding to the Russian aggression.
Right, I see. Well, Professor Lagranzi, one more question. The Ukraine is actually also desperately seeking for the approval of a $61 billion defense aid package from Washington, but that decision is also being delayed. And it seems, the support from Western allies are being either delayed or going to be reduced, considering the U.S. presidential election that is going to come on next year. If that happens, how might that affect the war in Ukraine? Should we expect any peace negotiations to eventually begin?
That's an excellent question. That is certainly what President Putin is counting on. I mean, like the results of elections in the United States. But I mean, quite sincerely, I think that the war in Ukraine is going to end the way the war in Korea ended about 70 years ago. I mean, eventually a line will be drawn because for both parties, a political compromise is seen as impossible. So that's it will probably end in an armistice, not in a peace treaty. And unfortunately, a wound will be left in the heart of Europe. That is the most likely scenario. I really cannot see sort of peace negotiations developing. It will be military realities that sort of like determine the final settlement the way it has happened in Korea about 70 years ago. This is my prediction.
I see. Well, it is really unfortunate to hear that this war could end in armistice like that happened in Peninsula. Well, we are running out of time, but I'd like to ask this last question to our Professor Im. So there are so many variables that we need to consider, but what do you expect for both wars in 2024? What are the scenarios that could play out?
I'm sorry, I don't have a really good answer for this very much complicating situations. And next year, so many elections will be held again in January, Taiwanese president election, and then March, Russian presidential election, and then April, Korea will have the general election, and Japan will have, the president election for the LDP, the ruling party, and then again the November American presidential election. So all this, it's like a two-level game, like Robert Putnam, Harvard professor, said. Again, domestic politics can definitely be influential over the international politics. So it's very much difficult, but I do share my own views too with Professor Ragranzi. Probably the armistice might be the only realistic way to resolve the situations in Europe so far.
All right, I see your point. Well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Im and Professor Lagranzi, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be next Tuesday with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the weekend, and goodbye.